So Marilyn was my first interview. And Marilyn lost her son to the opioid crisis and her mother to dementia or Alzheimer's. And what I loved about having Marilyn as my first guest was, for all intensive purposes on paper, Marilyn and I could not be any different. Or we couldn't, be more different. And it was pretty quickly, I had joined a local grief group here in town where I realized that grief is the most universal experience that we're all going to have. And that no matter your race, socioeconomic status, no matter the way that you lost your loved one, or, any of the details surrounding it, it is a common shared experience, and we can't hide from it. It's going to happen to all of us. It's all of our fates. Some people are lucky enough to go along their life and not lose somebody in a traumatic way. But everyone you love, something's going to happen to them. And so Marilyn hit that home for me. And she is one of those people that would have never become an acquaintance or a part of my story or occupied a piece of my heart. And Marilyn is just so special to me. And it was my honor to have her as my first guest. Marilyn gave me 2 phrases for her current state of grief. It was growing through the grief and questions for God. This was something that was super reflective for so many of us. The questions for God, if you are religious and you are a Christian, why did God do this? Why did God let my loved ones suffer? Why am I alone? Questioning our own mortality, things like that. It's so, so common. And this episode is so poignant and worth such a listen just to hear how Marilyn navigated that. And if you are a Christian, I invite you to join, any of your local grief share groups through a church. It will help you go through this and realize just how normal it is and how it is okay to have these questions for God and that He has an answer. In this episode, I was just learning how to record. So the audio quality is terrible. I wish I could go back through and fix it, but it's something that I learned and tried to adapt, and we've come a long way. So there are points of the episode where you're going to need to turn it up or turn it down. I apologize on that one. Really, Marilyn takes a very, very brave look, if anyone's lost anybody to addiction, about kind of the dark side of addiction. I'll give you an example. She recounts having to hide her electronics when she knew her son would come over. She'd go put him in her trunk because his addiction was desperate to go and steal these things to pay for more drugs. He wasn't trying to hurt his mom. This was the addiction. And I think so many people who've lost a loved one or even are in the thick of addiction of one that they love can connect with. There's no bounds to it. And she talks about that, and she is so brave. And I just think that it's an incredible thing to listen to. And my heart really goes out to anybody who has had that kind of a shared experience. One of the things that was like that reflective mirror that I was talking about is how Marilyn feels like the system failed her and failed her son, whether it was in terms of getting help, it was in terms of the police doing their due diligence, that he was not just another number, but maybe something can be learned from his death. She felt like there was some failures, and so many people that lost their loved one to COVID or in other ways, I'm sure at some point thinks, oh, the system could be better. There were failures along the way, and that's just hindsight. And once you can kind of reconcile those things, it becomes more at peace with your soul, but you feel like you can still do something to fix it. And that's where Marilyn is at in her journey. And it's an incredible thing to listen to. It was also interesting, which I think so many people can connect with, was the anticipatory grief of her experience with her mother. She said in the episode that it was so hard losing her son, but her mother was such a part of her every day to day. It was her partner. It was, it's just, she was in the trenches with her mom. And that slow process of The grief of kind of seeing her mother wilt away is something that's like so difficult, and so many people can connect with it. I had 30 days of anticipatory grief. Someone else in the next episode had none because they didn't see the death coming. But anticipatory grief is an interesting thing to explore and super common. Um, and Marilyn talks about that in her episode as well. One of the things that I also connected with Marilyn is that she talked about the hard things that she was struggling with. And one of those that stuck out in my mind was her son passed away in a motel of drug overdose of deadly gray, which she describes, and it's incredible because I didn't even know it was really out there. Deadly gray could kill an elephant in its tracks. It goes and just stops the heart. It's like this insane cocktail of like 4 different drugs that just go, and it's a life ender. And so Marilyn talks about how it was so hard for her to drive by the motel where she lost her son. She still doesn't like to do it. And I remember having this moment, and a lot of people will talk about what that trigger is for them. So this was just like a small one, but for me, it was I didn't like at first going into TJ Maxx. That's where I got to talk to my mom for the last time in her life. It was like in the aisles of TJ Maxx with a bunch of strangers. And it will forever hold that. But I was avoiding it at first. I was like, I don't want to go in there. Like, because I can see it, I can feel it. I know where I was. I know who, I can see the faces of the people that were looking at me, having this like insane heart to heart, because I knew it would be the last time I spoke to her. I can remember just people being like, what is this woman doing? So it wasn't a pleasant memory, but I knew that I was starting to give it more life than it deserved. And what I mean by that is TJ Maxx is not a reflection of my mother. It does not define her life. It is not something that I should allow to occupy space in my life. It doesn't have to become this demon. And reluctantly, I was like, you got to go in there. You can't do this anymore. And this was only like a week or two after she died, maybe a month. And I was like, I've got to do it. And, you go take a deep breath and you go do it. And it's not necessarily fun, but you do it. And everyone has to do that on their own timeline. There is no right way to do it. There is no wrong way. I just knew for me, it was like one of those things that I didn't want to give more life than it needed. And so I really, I really reflected with Marilyn that she doesn't like to go drive by that motel. She's not ready. Um, and I totally respected that. And I bet so many of you can connect with that as well. I can't recommend Marilyn's episode enough, minus the audio issues. You'll turn it up, you'll turn it down. I wish it was better quality again, but it is such a good eye opening episode for anybody who's lost somebody to addiction. Even if you haven't, I think anybody who's a parent needs to know, what kind of drugs are floating around there. The drug that her son took can even be in a gummy form, and kids wouldn't even know what they're taking. If you have lost a mother or a father and you've been a caretaker, there are so many incredible, insightful moments in this episode. It is absolutely worth taking a listen. And thank you, Marilyn, for forever being my first guest and part of my journey. You occupy a part of my heart, and I'm so thankful for you.